Jacob Hornberger, president of the Future of Freedom Foundation, and welcome to this week's Trump Watch, the show that, as you all know, watches what Donald Trump's doing each week and then comes back and gives you an analysis and report on what's happening, especially with respect to the measures that he takes that accelerate the destruction of liberty and prosperity in America. Well, word has it that emergency rooms were filled all across America last week, really all over the world, with people who were experiencing severe neck injuries. And those neck injuries apparently came about because of whiplash. And the whiplash came about because of Donald Trump's erratic tariff policy. Tariffs are on, tariffs are off, tariffs are on, tariffs are off. And by this time, people they kept going back and forth with their heads and their necks that they suffered this severe whiplash and neck injuries. Now, let me try to understand exactly what Trump and the Trumpsters are saying with this really policy that goes back, the reasoning goes back to like the 1500s or the 1600s. I mean, these are protectionist dead enders. Apparently, they have never heard of Adam Smith. They have never heard of the classical economists. They have never heard of Frederick Bastiat or Cobden and Bright, Richard Cobden and John Bright in England, who led the free trade movement in England in the 1800s. I mean, this is settled. Free trade is a good thing. But now it's fascinating, you've got these protectionist dead enders that are resorting to arguments that have been destroyed by the classical economists, Adam Smith, the Austrian economists later on, Milton Friedman. They've destroyed those arguments, but yet the protectionist dead enders are reviving these old dead arguments. But let me see if I understand what they're saying. Okay, if I understand correctly, President Trump is saying that economic protectionism is a good thing, that high tariffs are a good thing. They're going to lead to a golden era, he says, or a great society, to use Lyndon Johnson's term. And what he's arguing, if I understand him correctly, is that in and of themselves, tariffs are a fantastic thing, that they're something that we should all celebrate. He called it Liberation Day. Really, it should have been called Tax Celebration Day. I still wonder whether Trump understands that tariffs are taxes on the American people. I mean, it's like I think he's got in his mind that maybe the Chinese or the Russians or whoever he's putting tariffs or sanctions on or whatever is paying the tariff. That we're really teaching them a lesson. No, he's teaching us a lesson. The tax is on us. A tariff is just a sales tax. That's all it is. It's a regressive tax. It falls disproportionately on poor people and in the lower middle classes. It's a sales tax on imported goods, and he calls it Liberation Day. Republicans, as I've always said, are big spenders and they're big taxers, and we're seeing this here. But now he's saying, though, that tariffs are a wonderful thing in and of themselves, that this is the way to get America to its golden era, bring manufacturing plants back to America, smokestacks running full speed, essentially a wall around America, not just on the southern border to keep people out, but a wall all around the United States to keep goods from coming in, like a self-sufficient society. But then, so he levies this enormous tariff across the board. But then all of a sudden, there's some panicking going on. Well, the stock market starts plummeting, and I think that's Trump's shibboleth, the stock market. But he's watching the stock market go down, but he's sticking by his guns because his belief is that tariffs are a good thing in and of themselves. Well, then something starts happening. And I'm not sure I quite understand all the ramifications, but there's a lot of smart people on Wall Street that understand it, including in the banking industry. And that's the bond market. That apparently something started happening with the bond market that made a lot of people very, very nervous, maybe even scared. You had big Wall Street types, hedge fund managers, but a lot of big bankers watching what was going on and they saw that the interest rates in long-term bonds were starting to soar. And apparently this is like a real no-no. This is not supposed to happen, that people believe in America. When there's crisis or chaos, they go for a haven of safety, and always that has been U.S. government bonds. And all of a sudden, the demand for bonds is going down during this crisis. And that freaked out some people. And they, from what I can tell, pressured Donald Trump into changing course. And so he drops the tariffs for 90 days, he says, on 70 countries, or on all the countries except for China. Well, and then he says, "Oh, they're calling me. They all want to make deals. Look at me. I'm strong. Man, they're all catering to me." And I mean, he didn't use that kind of wording, but it was sort of that sense that he was like reveling the fact that people were just, bowing to him and saying, "Hey, I want to make a deal. But wait a minute. If tariffs are good in and of themselves, why drop them? Well, the Trumpsters then shifted gears and they said, no, this is a negotiating tactic. This is to get other people to drop their tariffs. Really? So are you saying that tariffs are not a good thing and that you're trying to get them to drop their tariffs so that we can drop our tariffs too? Yeah, Jacob, that's it. Well, wait a minute, though. A few minutes ago, you said that tariffs were good in and of themselves, that they would lead to a golden era. I don't understand what's going on here. Well, neither do they. It's just that the Trumpsters have this blind allegiance to Trump. That whatever Trump says, they're going to come up with a rationalization, no matter how inane it is, and having to resort to 17th century arguments to sustain this position, inane position that has been destroyed by free market economists over the last couple of centuries or so. I mean, this is just the mindset of a cult. That whatever the cult leader says, we will stand behind him. So if he says, we got to have tariffs today because it's a great thing, then they'll say, yes, Jacob, tariffs lead to great prosperity, golden eras. But if he changes his mind tomorrow and says, well, no, we're trying to lower the tariffs, and I'm going to suspend them for 90 days. Oh, yeah, Jacob, that's what we need to do, you see. Now, this bond thing is kind of interesting because it's saying that people don't have confidence in the United States, at least in these long-term government bonds. They don't have confidence in the U.S. government. They don't have confidence that they'll repay the bonds. I mean, that's what it's kind of indicating. But now Trump kept the tariffs on with respect to China, and his position on China is, oh man, we're going to keep those tariffs on. And when China retaliated with more tariffs, he came back with higher tariffs. But wait a minute. If the idea is that lower tariffs are better because all these countries are coming over and bowing and wanting to lower tariffs, why not with China too? How can they be good here and bad here? You see? But the Trumpsters, oh yeah, Jacob, China's different. I mean, this is absolutely inane. And the economic destruction that's taking place is incredible. I mean, you can just read the stories. I read one guy on Amazon. He sells card games. I think I read it in the Wall Street Journal. And he sells them on Amazon, but his business comes from China, where they manufacture his card games and stuff. And the guy's on a small profit margin. And so the tariffs, they're going to put him out of business. Right there in China, he said that he's his business, I think, like if he sells a card game for $14, something like that, these are not the exact figures, but all of a sudden they're going to increase to his price to like $24 or $20 or something, where he says people won't buy it at that price. And so he sees the handwriting on the wall that Donald Trump's trade policy with China is hurting Americans. And Trump has this notion of, oh no, this will be a golden era of self-sufficiency and so forth. Well, I read another article about Brazil. Brazil had this same policy. Maybe it still does, I don't know. But they had this self-sufficient that we're going to make everything ourselves. And they're tremendously impoverished as a result of it. You see, because that's what free trade does. Free trade enables people to better their economic conditions by widening the ambit of trade. The more people who are offering you things in exchange, the better off you are. Okay? I mean, in every economic exchange, both sides benefit. That's because each side is giving up something he values more for something he values less. So trade is a fantastic thing, and the more people that are offering you things around the world, the better off you are, whether you're an employer or a producer or seller or whatever. Everybody benefits from this. And there's that famous essay, if you've never read it, and I'm sure most of you have to watch this program, but if you haven't, read I, Pencil by Leonard Reed. You can see it online. It's just marvelous little exposition of how a pencil gets developed from people participating, coordinating activities from all over the world. Some of whom don't even know that they're participating in the production of a pencil. Like, they're making lead in Borneo or wherever, or the rubber is made somewhere else and so forth. But it all comes together in the form of a simple little thing like pencil. Now, if we take something much more complex like an automobile, I mean, there's all kinds of moving parts with electronics and so forth. And so people all over the world are doing their share, their part in the division of labor to produce this part or that part or this part. And it's a very intricate, complex phenomenon that the free market produces. This is like the miracle of the market. And this is what tariffs and trade wars and all destroy. Now, interestingly enough, Trump seems to get this, because at the last minute this last week, he exempted Apple. Apple computers, and he exempted laptops and iPhones and some other electronic stuff, including in China, that we're going to exempt it, because if you look at the iPhone, it is so intricate, and the tiniest little parts in there that are made in China. And to have those parts made over here would almost be impossible because of having to shift the resources and find the people who are able to do these tiny little things. I mean, this is what the division labor is all about. They're better at that, producing the tiny little parts that we then import, and we're better at putting the whole thing together. And it's a beautiful system that is self-coordinating, like iPencil, like the one I was telling you about. And so if Trump tariffs required that iPhones be produced here in the United States totally, it would be like double. It would cost, what's an iPhone cost, about, let's say, $1,000? It would be like $3,000 or more, $3,000 to buy an iPhone. For what? For what? So we can say, oh, we're self-sufficient, we're producing iPhones ourselves. This is what happened in Brazil. They end up impoverishing themselves with this dead-ender trade policy. But let me emphasize the most important thing here, that these tariffs and these trade wars, economic protectionism, they're an assault on our freedom, our economic freedom. And this is what we often forget. It's easy to make the utilitarian case here about how destructive all this is, and everybody can see it. But a lot of people don't think about the moral case because they're convinced they're free. This is one of the downsides to people having this mentality that was inculcated them in the public schools that their parents were forced to send them to, public government schools, and even licensed schools. They're scared to death of losing their license, that they're free. You see, if you think you live in a free society, then anything that happens is not an assault on your freedom. But once you realize that you're not living in a free society, you start recognizing that the things they're doing are accelerating the destruction of our freedom. They're making it worse. And one of these is these trade restrictions. My money is my money. This applies to every single person. You have a right to do whatever you want with your own money. This is a fundamental right. It pre-exists government. It's a natural right. It's a God-given right. This is what Jefferson was talking about when he talked about liberty. That liberty it encompasses the right to do with you what you want with your own money, which means buying and selling from whomever you want. You want to buy from a Chinese? That's your right. People may not approve of it. They may say, I hate the Chinese. I hate the Chinese. They're communists and whatever. Fine. They don't have to trade with their money. But you have a right to do that. You have a right to go to Cuba, even though that right is not recognized in the United States. They put you in jail if you go to Cuba and spend money there without permission. But you have a right to do that. That their incarceration of people for going to Cuba and spending money there is an illegitimate exercise of a tyrannical power. They're destroying liberty when they tell you this. So that's one of the biggest things here is the destruction of our fundamental rights. Not to mention the process too. I mean, it's amazing that we live in a country where the president can raise taxes whatever he wants. Imagine if Harris had won the presidency and said, I'm hereby decreeing a 20% increase in the income tax rate of the top 30% of income earners in America. I'm going to tax the rich, and I decree this myself. I mean, Republicans would have gone ballistic. But here's a Republican saying, I'm going to raise these taxes on my own. He didn't go to Congress. Excuse me. He just does it himself. It's like a decree law. It's absolutely amazing that he has this authority, and by declaring an emergency. See, Congress long ago delegated its authority, which you can't do constitutionally. One branch of government cannot, delegate its authority under the Constitution to another branch. But they gave him the authority to declare an emergency, which is ridiculous because he decides what an emergency is. There's no emergency, but he just declares an emergency. Excuse me. And once he declares the emergency, now I can raise taxes on the American people, like willy-nilly. Tax here, tax there. Well, okay, stop that tax. Apple computer, okay, drop that tax. But, why drop any tariff if tariffs are going to lead to the golden era? This is all the built-in contradictions. And it's all ugly. I mean, it's very, very ugly. I mean, it doesn't surprise me that people are shunning U.S. government bonds. People are shunning America. I read that a lot of people in Europe and Asia are redoing their vacation plans. For one thing, they're scared. I mean, they don't know what's going to happen to them if they come to the United States. There's no telling. They could be picked up and sent to El Salvador and be put in a terrorist encampment there. It's becoming a very ugly place, and it's sort of the solution to the illegal immigration problem. You see, you've got this police state that is now going nationwide. It used to be only on the border. You all know I've talked about this police state for many decades now. On the border, I grew up there. I experienced this police state, but now it's going nationwide. Excuse me, and it's gone nationwide, and I always said it would be. And so it's an assault on all of our freedoms. And when you live under a police state, that is the exact opposite of a free society. And they say, well, look, it's working. It's working. The illegal immigration is down. Well, part of it may be the police state aspect. I mean, there's no question that you can strengthen your police state and prevent more people from coming in, sort of like North Korea. North Korea's got a very militarized police state there along the border. But the thing is, it's to keep people in because nobody wants to get into North Korea. It's an ugly society. And that very well may be happening here where people say, it's not worth it. We don't like your country anymore. It just is not an attractive place. It's an ugly place. So that's a nice way to cure your illegal immigration problem. Just make your country so ugly and so unattractive that nobody wants to come in anyway. And we see that we see that the same mindset working with immigrants. We don't want goods. We don't want your goods to come in here. We don't want your services to come in. And we're going to build a wall so China can't send their goods and services to us. They can't flood this with their products. But it's the same with people. Don't bring your people over here anymore. It's like an isolationist mentality. We're going to isolate America from the rest of the world. Except for the U.S. military and its empire. We're going to unleash the empire to go anywhere in the world and bomb people and so forth. They're already threatening to bomb Mexico now. U.S. officials threatening to bomb Mexico. They think they're going to win the war on drugs by bombing Mexico. And I guarantee you, if a war breaks out between Mexico and the United States, and Mexico suddenly invites China to install some nuclear weapons there in Mexico along the border, watch and see the reaction of U.S. officials. They will go ballistic, the same way Russia went ballistic when the U.S. was threatening to absorb Ukraine into NATO so that they could put their nuclear missiles on Russia's border. And so they won't tolerate. I guarantee you, they won't tolerate that. But you've got this same mentality that immigrants are bad. They're bad people. Just like foreign goods are bad. They're bad for America and so forth. So you're dealing with people and goods. Back in the 90s, we emphasize the relationship between trade and immigration. We published a book called The Case for Free Trade and Open Immigration, arguing for open borders, free movements of goods, services, and people across borders. It's the only solution. I've said this for the 35 years that FFF been in existence, and we've had an immigration crisis throughout all that time. Okay, we haven't always had trade crises, but we have a big trade crisis now, and that we've said that the only solution, and I want to emphasize that, there's no other solution, and that solution is open borders. Now, the upside to this whole free trade thing is it's the first time in 35 years, I mean, it's kind of a high for me, that FFF's holding a position that's in the mainstream. I mean, you look at the Wall Street Journal, Washington Post, New York Times, mainstream papers are carrying commentaries in favor of free trade. I mean, it's like this is the common dominant mindset in America is free trade. The fringe position, if you can imagine, is the protectionist position, the tariff position, the positions that's causing all this economic destruction. That's the fringe position. The Trumpsters are holding the fringe position. We are holding what is really the popular position. And I'm thinking, could this be a catalyst that we've been long waiting for in the libertarian movement? I've often thought that, what could bring about a free society in our lifetime? And I think, well, you need a catalyst. But you got to be prepared in case that catalyst comes. And that's why we've been promoting this principled case for freedom for 35 years now. Is it to get people ready to understand? So if the catalyst comes, the opening comes, you can seize on it and do some open field running. And free trade, wow, it's just amazing how many people are gravitating or already are in favor of free trade. It's fantastic. So that then could lead people to say, well, if the libertarians are right on trade, which we are, then maybe they're right on immigration too, that open borders is the only solution. And it really is the only solution. Now, let me go into that because we've got a lot to watch about Donald Trump on that. Y'all know the case with Judge Jim Boasberg there in Washington, where he was issued an injunction, a temporary restraining order, prohibiting the Trump officials from sending Venezuelan immigrants down to El Salvador under the guise of this 1798 law. Can you imagine? That says if you're at war, you don't need to accord due process. And so the Trump people are saying, oh, well, we're at war because we're being invaded by a gang, and it's ridiculous. There's no war. It's a sham argument. But anyway, they took it to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court decided that Boasberg did not have the authority to issue the orders, that the cases should have been brought where the immigrants were, not in Washington, D.C., and the immigrants were apparently in Texas or New York. And so the Trump people were gloating, oh, we won, but it was really a Pyrrhic victory because the Supreme Court upheld Boasberg's substantive ruling requiring due process of law before they could do this. And so they said, okay, you can bring the cases back where the immigrants are in the form of habeas corpus, which, as I've long said, is the linchpin of a free society, as legal scholars have pointed out throughout the ages. And the government is prohibited from sending people to El Salvador without due process of law. So the Supreme Court upheld that basic principle, which is what Boasberg was doing. But Boasberg on that part of the case is now out of it, except for the contempt proceeding. Whether they violated his order originally to not deliver those immigrants into the clutches of this Salvadorian president down there in his big prison complex where they torture people and so forth. And so that contempt proceeding is still pending. Not sure where it's gonna play out. We should find out rather shortly, though. In the meantime, there's at least one guy that is totally innocent down there. He was a El Salvadorian immigrant that was here, and he was not supposed to be sent down there, and they sent him anyway. And so a judge in Maryland, let me see, what's her name? Paula Zinnis. She's ordered them to bring the guy back. And that case reached the Supreme Court, and they effectively upheld her power to facilitate his coming back. So she's ordering U.S. officials to give daily updates of what they're doing to bring him back. And they're dancing. They're dancing with her, dancing, doing everything. And it's smart-ass dancing. It's trying to avoid bringing this guy back. Because we all know, all Trump has to do is pick up the phone and call Bukele. Bukele's now part of the U.S. empire, and say, put the guy on a plane and bring him back. Send him back. And Bukele would follow orders immediately. There's no question about it. And he got paid $6 million for this. You think that's probably more money this guy's ever seen in a lifetime. It's more money than most of us have seen in a lifetime. You think he doesn't have dreams of the prospects of more millions of dollars coming into his government coffers there? And so if U.S. officials called him and said, hey, put the guy back, he would do it immediately. But they're dancing. Well, they're saying, oh, we don't have jurisdiction. We don't have control over this, Judge. We're just really sorry. Well, and then there's always the possibility that under the table, some U.S. officials will say, hey, look, regardless of what we say in public, keep the guy there. And of course, you'd never hear about that. It was sort of like when Pinochet came to power in that coup, that Henry Kissinger went down to Chile and told him under the table, in a private conversation that look, we're going to have to be making public pronouncements condemning what you're doing, but he was essentially saying we support you. And Pinochet, fine, I don't care about that. And so publicly they would say, oh, yes, we condemn human rights abuses and so forth. And human rights abuses, they meant rapes and torture and other things that Pinochet was doing with really the full support of U.S. officials, of innocent people. So you don't really know where this is going to play out, but all we know right now is that the U.S. officials in the Justice Department are dancing with the judge in a smart-ass way. And we'll see how that plays out. Let's see, what else is going on? We're about out of time here. Oh, the U.S. is still contemplating bombing Mexico, dropping bombs on drug cartels. The drug war dead-enders are now saying, oh, we can win the war on drugs, And notice that they're morphing the war on drugs with the war on terrorism. They're now labeling drug dealers as terrorists. And why is that important? Because we're at war in the war on terrorism. Remember after 9/11 when they had lost their Cold War, the war on communism, the war on the Reds, the Russians are coming and all that? Well, they replaced that with the war on terrorism. And to a certain extent, the war on Muslims. And since the world is filled with terrorists and Muslims, this is a perpetual war. It'll never stop, unlike the war on the Cold War that had a stop to it. But war on terrorism, it's gone on forever. It's going to go on forever. It's a global war. And they have omnipotent powers. This is where we see the power of assassinating, including assassinating Americans, torture, including torture of Americans. And it can happen here on American soil because the whole world is a global war on terrorism. Terrorists are everywhere. So now they're morphing this into the drug war, which gives them the war on terrorism powers of assassination, bombing. And bombs, we got to bomb the terrorists, you see. So you're not bombing a drug cartel, you're dropping bombs on a terrorist organization. And so now we're seeing that what they were doing after the post 9/11 is they were seizing on that crisis to expand their powers, especially in the national security establishment, over the American people and the people of the world. But again, we've got destruction of liberty. You're not free when you live in a society when your government can assassinate anybody. And notice that they've said they're thinking about sending Americans to El Salvador. So it's the perfect ruse. It's not Guantanamo, where they still have control. Let's say they pick up an American today that they don't like, they label him a terrorist, put him on a military plane before his spouse can find a lawyer that knows how to file a petition for writ of habeas corpus, find a judge willing to issue the order, serve the order, which they might ignore anyway. But they put him on a plane, they get him down to El Salvador and release him. Okay, now imagine that was you. Imagine that today you find yourself in that Salvadorian prison or terrorist compound that they have down there. And that yesterday you were with your family, today you're in the middle of that prison camp. What do you do? You see? Because when they start dancing with the judge, they say, we don't have jurisdiction. He's now we're sorry this happened. It was maybe a mistake, maybe it wasn't, but they've lost jurisdiction. They don't have any control. So it's different from Guantanamo. It's worse because they're playing this dance game of we don't have authority over there anymore once they deliver you down there. And so now we're seeing the real tyranny coming together with the war on immigrants, with the whole police state, attacks on due process, attacks on free speech, and using immigrants who are a popular scapegoat because people don't like immigrants for whatever reason. I love them, but people, they make a good scapegoat. That's what, in history, when you look at totalitarian regimes, they look and see who are the good scapegoats where people are not going to come to the defense. And so here the scapegoats are illegal immigrants or Muslims or suspected terrorists or drug dealers or whatever, people that you would not ordinarily expect people to come to the defense of. But we have to come to the defense of the most unpopular because they're using those as the precedent to destroy our own freedom. That's what we've always got to keep in mind. And finally, we've got to always think, as I've emphasized so long, that this isn't a Donald Trump problem, okay? Any more than it would have been a Harris problem or a Biden problem or whatever. This is a system problem. We've got a bad system that has come into existence in this country. The welfare state system, the drug war system, the national security state system, the war on immigrants system. It's your system, and it's breaking apart. It's taking our country down, out of control federal spending, Federal Reserve, paper money, inflation, monetary destruction, financial destruction. It's taking our country down from within. The big threat's not from without. The big threat is from within. And people thought that Republicans, right-wingers, thought that by electing Donald Trump, they could make this system work, the welfare state, the empire, and so forth. I don't think so. In fact, I know so, that this is an inherently defective system. And so what we as libertarians need to do is keep raising people's vision that the solution to this is not getting better people in public office, not getting a better person to be president, but rather restoring the sound founding principles of this country. We know that there were some bad ones, slavery being the biggest, but there were some good ones, and it's those good ones that we need to get our country back on the right track toward restoring. That's Trump Watch this week. Look forward to talking to you all next week.